negotiate what the terms of a bail
would
be about, or not?
The attorney can have what's called a bail hearing, and they certainly, they can make an argument, or he or she can make an argument as to what the amount of the bail should be, if any at all.
Yeah, it's more of an argument than a negotiation, because the judge won't negotiate when the judge
It's an
sets
argument,
the bail.
okay.
Yeah.
That's right,
Good point
and
of
while that's
clarification.
happening, the state has a prosecutor or a public district attorney in Massachusetts,
Or the police
police
prosecutor.
prosecutor, and that individual will make the similar argument, except their argument would be have bail as high as possible.
There's a risk. And now, there's other things that go into it, too. If it's a domestic assault charge, the court will issue a no-contact order telling you have to stay away from the person you assaulted, that type of thing.
Would you have said, backing up to what's going on in the news a little bit with Roman Polanski, he certainly had means. Is he considered a flight risk? He certainly did get to leave the country.
Well,
What happens with
let's
that?
assume that he was charged before he left. Otherwise, there'd be the same issue they had with that case in Rhode Island with the dump about statute of limitations. But, because it's about 30 years, something like that.
30 years.
So, assuming that the charges were brought and he left, he may have left before bail was even set. So if he's arrested in another country and there's an extradition, which is a process to bring him back to the United States, you can rest assured that there would be bail set of cash or surety or something, if bail set at all. And whether bail set, you're entitled to bail under the Constitution except under certain capital crimes. And depending on what he's charged with, if he's entitled to bail, you can rest assured that since he already left, he's a flight risk.
Yeah.
They'll set a cash or a surety bond.
And he did pay something already to that victim, but it was years ago. Would that likely weigh in on his guilt or not?
I would
mean, Michael
assume.
Jackson had done things,
Yeah, but
even
see-
if he said he was not.
Right.
The defense attorney would argue that that should be excluded from a criminal case. It should not be used.
Used against him,
Him.
for being convicted.
Convicted.
If he was negotiating a civil case with somebody, and part of that deal was they won't testify, if that's something you could do, I don't know how they might even be able to bring a charge against him unless they have some other evidence of the crime being committed.
Do you care to weigh in on what your opinion is
Well,
of how
let's
this
go
is
back.
going to play out?
Let's go back one step before we do that, because you raised the Michael Jackson thing. See, I think that my memory is there had been allegations of some inappropriate contact with the
Yes.
minor that was settled. And
Settled.
that case never went to a criminal
Yes,
trial.
that's my understanding.
And the thinking is that he bought them off, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah.
Paid for their silence. At least that's an allegation. And then there was a criminal case brought where he was found not guilty. Is that correct?
It was against a different,
Different child.
victim, yeah.
So I don't know enough about the Roman Polanski situation to know whether there was a potential civil case that was brought off or charges were brought already. So without that information, I can't tell you my prediction as to whether or not there's enough evidence for a charge to go forward or not. But I can pretty much guarantee if there's a way of extraditing him and getting him back here, they're going to push to do that.
Do you ever thought about whether or not he should be here and paying the piper?
Well, there's the
at that age?
lawyer side, and then there's the
Practical
the
side.
practical side.
Not that lawyers and people aren't both practical. in the
So,
same way.
legally, if I were to be defending him, certainly your duty as an attorney is to defend your client to the best ability. In that situation, the argument would be try and keep him where he's at. Practically speaking, as a human being, knowing what the offense is, and I shouldn't convict someone before he or she has been found guilty. But practically speaking, yeah, one could argue he should be brought back here and brought up on charges, if in fact that it did happen.
Speaking as the prosecutor, I
Yeah.
would agree with her.
Yes.
Of course, they say that what the victim has to say, which is she'd like to put this behind her.
If she doesn't
she's-
testify, they don't have a case.
Right.
But the victim doesn't get to decide justice, correct?
No,
No.
the prosecutor, if it's a federal case, it's, the U.S. attorney. If it's a state case in Rhode Island, the attorney general. It's their charge to bring or not bring. And the witness has some input in the sense that they're the victim, and there's a lot of victims' rights and advocates for
Yes.
the victim, but that's separate from whether or not the charge goes forward or not.
When, if we're not talking about Polanski now, but when we were talking about the arrest and bail and arraignment, there's talk about what is a pre-trial hearing versus trial? What's the rest of that process about? It seems like there's much for lawyers to do. I'll be cynical at that for a moment, but what are in those processes? What's each comprised
Your
of?
pretrial period is to establish discovery, exchanging important documents. For instance, the defendant's attorney has a right to receive all of the police reports if it's a DUI, a copy of the chemical test, if there's a blood test. You have to exchange all information. There's no such thing as surprise, surprise.
Right.
Because the defendant is entitled to every piece of information that the prosecution is going to bring forward in prosecuting this individual.
And if the defense has alibi witnesses, they
That's
have
right.
to disclose
They have
that
to-
to the state. But the process, as you're asking it, and it's a little different Mass in Rhode Island, but in Rhode Island, if someone's charged with a felony and it's not through an indictment, as we talked about, through the grand jury, there's usually a pre-arraignment conference.
That's right.
Where you, as the attorney, will go in and speak to the prosecuting attorney general, talk about the merits of the case, and see if you can even resolve it before the arraignment. We're talking felonies now. If that's not the case, then there's the arraignment, and then after the arraignment, it goes to a pretrial where you now talk again with the prosecutor, the attorney general, who's got the case in their lap for prosecution, for trial, and a judge, and you see again if there's any grounds for resolving it before trial, and if not, you go through that whole discovery process that Jackie's talking about, and then you get reached for trial and you try the case.
And at what point does the opportunity for plea bargaining come in? Does it come in once there's been the discovery or the...
You can do it at any point.
Right.
At any
It-
place?
it- Any time before trial, because you can try to do it at that pre-arraignment conference, what we call a PAC conference. If it doesn't work there, you can do it at pre-trial.
Mm-hmm.
You can continue to talk, you get reached for trial, you can do it before the jury's impaneled.
And you don't have
Or
a
after.
jury in district court.
Right.
In district court in Rhode Island, but
Right.
in district court in Mass, you do have juries.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Interesting.
unusual. Yeah, very unusual. Yeah.
And when there is a conviction, there's still an opportunity for that person to enlist a lawyer's services again for appeals.
Yep.
Is that the next is that the next thing that happens? Does that happen before or after someone is sentenced? What's the status?
You have a certain time frame
Right.
in which you can appeal.
Right.
So much to go over here. I think we've given a quick overview of what's happening. I'm sure that this is going to prompt a few questions. We invite you to give us email questions or call. The other side of it is if we finish this topic, then we thought that going forward, our next topic would probably be something along the lines of reverse mortgages, considering that many people are interested in still the economy in the state that it's in. May be helpful for many of you to get the 411 from our lawyers, Jackie Grasso and David Bizarre. We thank you for tuning in. I think we have pros and cons of how to handle some of these cases, but at least we know that there are lawyers who can handle criminal justice, and people should certainly look for the best possible lawyer they can, someone who has some experience. So thank you for tuning in to Legal Matters. That discussion of legal matters will continue, and I hope you'll stay tuned as we cover this and hopefully reverse mortgages next time. Please stay tuned. Jackie, I think appeals brief.